UFC 299 is looking like it might be complete. There's 11 fights on the card. There's a championship fight. They took away that TBD versus TBA quote-unquote main event. It's looking like this might be the card, but maybe something gets added on later. As it stands right now, I don't know how even UFC 300 is going to beat this card. It's so insanely stacked. 8 of those 11 fights you cannot miss, which is very rare to have that many great fights on a single card. We have Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera 2, which is an interesting fight. A few welterweight fights that just got announced last weekend. Gilbert Burns is back after the shoulder injury, and he's taking a big step down in the rankings here, fighting Della Maddalena. Very interesting fight right there. Kevin Holland is going up against the long-awaited newcomer, Michael Venom Page. This is going to be a banger, man. Someone's getting knocked out. It's between two guys who are roughly the same size, same build, same reach, knockout power coming from both. That's going to be a very exciting fight. And we finally get to see where Michael Venom Page stacks up as a UFC caliber fighter. Then we got a rebook of a heavyweight fight, Blaydes versus Jailton Almeida. Excellent to determine, in my opinion, who's the next #1 contender to fight Tom Aspinall, because it looks like Jones and Stipe might retire after their fight, making Aspinall the undisputed champ. The fact that Jailton Almeida is getting booked with Blaydes kind of corners Tom Aspinall to fight Ciryl Gane, but we'll see what he does there. This heavyweight fight is excellent. Wrestler versus grappler matchup, and we get to see more of Almeida striking if Blaydes decides to keep the fight standing. Then we got a bantamweight fight, a quick turnaround from Yadong, who just fought a couple weeks ago. That's a 3-month turnaround to go up against Chookagian. That is pretty brave, man. I know he fought Chris Gutierrez. He did go 5 rounds. He looked pretty good in the fight. But to turn around 3 months later and take on someone like Chookagian, he's trying to make a statement. If Yadong succeeds in this, the guy cannot be overlooked anymore. Then we go to the lightweight division, Mateusz Gamrot versus RDA. This is a good fight. I like this, but the only thing that leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth is Gamrot was the backup fighter for the lightweight title fight, and now he's fighting RDA. He didn't get to step in when one of those fighters pulled out of the title fight, and now he's going against RDA, who's way lower in the rankings compared to Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev. But it is a pretty good fight nonetheless. Another rebooking of a fight, and this time at welterweight, Neal versus Garry. It's getting put together again. Neal may now be able to shut the mouth of Garry for all the trash that he was talking, bringing up the mugshot and all that stuff. And Neal definitely has a lot of ammo at this point. He's not known to be a trash talker, but he could play into the mental game with Garry at the moment, who seems to be somewhat vulnerable there. But stylistically, this is an excellent fight, could absolutely be your fight of the night. And then finally, we have Katlyn Chookagian versus Maycee Barber. This is a step up of competition for Maycee Barber. If she gets by someone like Katlyn Chookagian, who's been like top 3, top 5, she's like 1 fight away from a title shot. In any other world, she probably would get a title shot, but after probably 1 fight away, due to the fact that you do have Manon Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield still out there without getting their shot. So looking at the card as it is, I think the pay-per-view buys could be pretty high. O'Malley versus Chito is the biggest fight at bantamweight you can have right now. They have like the biggest star power. It's a rematch that a lot of people want to see. When the promos start hitting, is going to make people even more interested in this. I'm guessing anywhere from 3 to 500,000 buys. I'm more leaning toward like the high 400s, low 500s, which is a very good number, by the way, especially for a bantamweight title fight. And let's start with that. So I talked about it before when the fight got announced. I do like Sean O'Malley as an early prediction in this, but I am not counting out Chito for the fact that the guy has insane knockout power. In fact, he has so much power that in the first fight with O'Malley, he showed that he could knock him out with just a couple good shots. As soon as the fight hit the ground, Chito didn't hit him with a load of ground and pound. He didn't put down a hailstorm of ground and pound to finish him. Several big strikes put O'Malley out, and there was really no damage to the head while they were standing up. All the damage came from the ground and pound, and there wasn't that much of it. That's how powerful Chito is, and it shows to everybody he can knock O'Malley out if he hits him clean enough, especially if he is able to take the fight to the ground, land some good elbows, land some good hammer fists, even while in the full guard, and put him away. But taking down O'Malley at this point where Aljamain Sterling failed makes it very doubtful that Chito can do it. But Chito has taken down opponents in the past. He has gone that direction before. I wonder if he's going to mix it up on O'Malley, because I do expect him to have a difficult time landing his hands on him. The kicks can be there. O'Malley switches stances a lot better now. He moves a lot better than before. He does a very good job at resetting in parallel to confuse the opponent, make them question their technique. And in that lapse of moment, he's taking off an angle that you don't expect, landing some straight, landing some quick jab to the face, teep to the body, which is something he does very well. And the more of those land, the more he's going to square up Chito for a cross to land to his face, right? The more teeps you throw at someone's body, especially at southpaw, throwing that left teep to the body is going to cause Chito going to want to rotate himself to his own left side to deflect the kick, which is going to square him up for a potential cross from Sean O'Malley. But Chito's one of the trickier fighters to land clean like that, and he has an iron chin behind that impeccable defense. So I could definitely see him taking some really good shots from Sean O'Malley, just like he did in the first fight, actually. He took some pretty big shots early on, didn't look too disturbed by them, and kept pressing forward. If Chito wants to win this fight, he has to increase that output. He's got to walk him down, put the pressure, and honestly take a bit of a Sean Strickland kind of game plan here. He doesn't do that. We haven't seen him do that before, but that is the game plan he should be wanting to take against someone like Sean O'Malley when it comes to pressure, keeping himself in boxing range at all times, stick behind the jab, and look for the counter shot whenever O'Malley wants to commit for his power punches, which he will do very often. And because of how often he throws his power hand, Chito's going to have a lot of opportunities to counter him. It's going to depend on which stance that O'Malley wants to take. I think if they're in the same stance, O'Malley's obviously going to start everything off the jab, and that's going to give a bit of a tell for Chito, who has an excellent parry, great at catching the jab and countering with his own slapping left hook. And it's a very weird form how he throws that left hook, but it does have a lot of power on it. I don't understand that. When I see him throw a left hook like that, the power just has to be natural. It's not even off the form itself. The guy is just that powerful. Look at the damage he inflicted on Rob Font with those left hooks. It really boggles your mind how he's able to generate that much power. And one of those left hooks on Sean O'Malley will wake him up, and he would not be able to take too many big shots like that. Now, if O'Malley wants to take the southpaw stance, he's going to line up his left hand with the outside foot, try to fire it down, and I think he'll have more success doing that. And it also takes away the outside leg kick, but it could open him up for body kicks and potentially even high kicks as well. So there is a bit of a danger there, and we know that Chito could throw a head kick at you with both legs, right? He knocked out Dominic Cruz with a left high kick, which is not his dominant leg. So if Chito's able to stick on him at boxing range, pressure him at all times, and work behind the jab, keep more output only really behind that jab. So he can line up the 1-2, he can line up the check left hook, he can measure distance constantly. I think he could potentially get to O'Malley after taking some big punches himself, but O'Malley maybe not able to take the same kind of damage in return. But ultimately, as an early prediction, I am going to go with Sean O'Malley. I think he should be able to pot shot, good southpaw left straights, land some good teeps to the body here and there, some good head kicks here and there, and I think he would ultimately win this through a decision. Very hard to ever see anybody knock Chito out. Then we go to the supposed co-main event, Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Gilbert Burns is a well-rounded fighter. Jack Della Maddalena likes to think that he is sometimes, and it got into some trouble when he fought Basil Hafez. But does Gilbert Burns want to stand with this guy? I wouldn't think so, man. Jack is a crafty striker. This guy is not only possesses knockout power, not only is precise with his counters and interceptions, but he has fantastic offensive and defensive technique. Even while plotting, sometimes opponents cannot get away from him. He cuts off the cage fairly well, and Burns doesn't necessarily have great footwork. He could be quite obvious on which direction he wants to take when he's trying to get away from the opponent in the cage, if he does get pressure, that is. But Burns could be the one that pressures Jack Della back, which would be the worst case scenario for Jack, in my opinion, because it allows Gilbert Burns to start attacking with more kicks from long range, keeping himself away from Jack's danger zone. And the further against the cage Burns puts Jack, the more reinforced double legs are open for Burns. So it gives him a grappling range weapon and a long range weapon that Jack really doesn't want him to have. Jack's got to do his best effort on pushing Burns away and establish his own pressure, which will take away a lot of those kicks. If Burns is throwing kicks on the back foot, he is going to be very open to punches from Jack. Jack will be able to block, counter with the right, or even extend the right hand if it's a low kick coming at him. And if Burns wants to exchange a bit, his punches could really get him into some trouble. There's a big window on the center for Jack to not really worry about attacks coming through. There's not going to be return fire from that center line from Gilbert Burns because most of his attacks are looping. Even his own jab has a weird arc to it. Jack should have complete domination of that center line. That's where the jabs are going to be effective, just like how they were for Kamaru Usman. And as long as it stays as that kind of exchange, Jack Della should get the better of Gilbert Burns. But he did make a lot of questionable grappling decisions when he fought Basil Hafez, who, by the way, was a short notice replacement. He probably didn't know too much about Basil. He probably didn't know he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he probably didn't know that he's a pretty good wrestler. So he pulled those guillotines when Basil tried to take him to the ground. Pulling those guillotines were a disastrous move for Jack Della. And if he starts pulling guillotines on Gilbert Burns, I'm just going to go take a walk. That should not be happening. If he pulls a ghillie, that would be like one of the worst fight IQ moments. So hopefully, sprawl and brawl, man. Sometimes he has a pretty good eye on takedowns that come from distance. He's able to counter those pretty well. He's able to stuff them. He actually has a very high takedown defensive rate, and most of that comes from the Basil Hoffes fight. Later in that fight, especially in the third round, Jack's takedown defense was a lot better, more on point. He knew not to go for the guillotine so much, and instead try to force the fight standing up. If Gilbert Burns cannot take him down, Gilbert could be in some trouble. But if he can take Jack down, he probably should win the fight as soon as it hits the ground. But then again, Burns doesn't submit too many guys these days. So that's going to be an interesting fight. And there's the whole X factor about the shoulder injury. We don't even know if Burns is going to be the same guy in there. So with all that together, could it be the change of the guard? Burns is older. He's been in the UFC for a long time. Jack is the new up-and-comer rising up. This could be his moment, especially if he's fighting a compromised Gilbert Burns or a Burns that's not in his optimal form. As an early prediction, I do like Jack Della. Then we go to Kevin Holland versus Michael Venom Page. Both these guys have tremendous confidence in their right hands. Michael Page will switch stances oftentimes. He will move around a lot more than Kevin Holland. That and the fact that they're both 6'3" with like an 80-inch reach and possessing tremendous power are the biggest similarities between these two. They move completely different. They strike quite differently. Michael Page will establish a jab a lot better. He has a better utilization of his kicks. He moves around a lot better. Kevin Holland is a plotter who doesn't apply as much pressure unless it's against someone like Michael Chiesa, who just was terrified of his striking. Kevin Holland has an iron chin, whereas Michael Page's chin seems quite average or maybe below average. So I could definitely see if Kevin Holland lands that right hand, Michael Page will probably not even take one of those. Whereas the other way around, I can see Kevin Holland probably taking one or two big right hands from Michael Venom Page. But the way that he throws it, he blitzes on you from so far away. It's actually absurd how fast he covers distance like that. And he will fly at you, full body weight behind the punch. And if that lands, most guys are getting put down. He is so incredibly fast, man, even at his age. And he has a bit of a similarity to a Robert Whittaker where they both like to blitz their opponent from range. And they're both incredibly fast at doing so. But that opening is still going to be there from the opposite stance jab. So if Kevin Holland wants to take the southpaw stance and Michael Page is trying to line up his big right hand from orthodox, Kevin Holland could use that power jab to intercept that blitz. But he's going to have that little bit of an arc to it because Michael Page is going to try to step off on the outside. So a bit of an arc on that jab could be enough to intercept that angle and be powerful enough because Michael Page is flying his head into the punch to get him knocked out. But ultimately, as an early prediction for this, I do like Michael Page. I think he has a lot more to work with here. I think he's a lot more versatile. His jab alone is going to be a big predicator on how this fight is going to play out. He's going to have a better understanding of range because he's going to be feinting constantly, because he's going to be using that jab. He has that linear back and forth movement, and it might be able to throw off Kevin Holland's right hands, causing him to overextend. And as soon as he overextends, Michael Page could just snipe him from there. So there's a lot more trickery and control on Michael Page's part. And we do know that Kevin Holland does not like to shoot takedowns. That would be a major path to victory here, but he didn't do it against Wonderboy. I don't expect him to do it against Michael Page either, as this fight has a similar kind of striking interest for not only himself, but also for the fans, and he wants to put on that kind of show. Then we go to the heavyweight fight, Curtis Blaydes versus Jailton Almeida. Wrestling versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's probably like 30 to 40 pounds of a difference between them. And the thing about Curtis Blaydes that makes him different than some of the guys that Almeida has fought so far, he is quite athletic for his size. Right, he's able to move around, he is fast for that size, he likes to try his hand at the striking, and it's up to him mostly if the fight hits the ground or not. He has the wrestling to determine that. He's the owner of the bridge if we cross over to the grappling department. If Almeida takes down Curtis Blaydes, that is a statement in itself. Because if he could take this guy down, he could take down pretty much anybody. And that is a very scary thought, especially for a guy at like 230 something pounds. But I'm very interested to see the extent of Almeida's striking. We've seen Curtis Blaydes test himself in the stand-up, and it's gone good sometimes, it's gone pretty bad sometimes, right? He was able to light up Derek Lewis a bit before he got knocked out, going for the takedown actually. So he does have something to his striking himself. He has a decent jab, a good 1-2. He was able to put that 1-2 on JDS constantly. And that's really the extent of what his striking does. for the most part, right? There's some different specifics here and there, but that's generally what he likes to work off of. Good back and forth movement, lining up the jab, throwing a lot of feints forward, and firing that 1-2 out there. Almeida, on the other hand, we haven't seen too much from his striking because he shoots on opponents a minute into each round. Apart from the front kick, or flying punches, crazy attacks like that, most of what Almeida is showing out there is a front kick and a double leg and some athleticism for other strikes. If the fight hits the ground and Almeida can keep Blaydes on the ground, he should be able to win this. But even if he gets Blaydes down, I think Blaydes should be able to get up to his feet. But then again, it is a heavyweight division. Some of these guys take a lot longer to stand up again. And Almeida is incredibly fast in every aspect of fighting compared to these heavyweights. My early prediction, I am going to go with Curtis Blaydes, but it could be a very close fight. The winner of this fight could get a title shot. It's possible. Depends what happens with Jones and Stipe. Then we go to Petr Yan versus Song Yadong. This is a fight that was supposed to happen. This is a fight that got a lot of fans excited, and now we hopefully get to see it, man. Hopefully they're both able to make it healthy and show up on fight night, as it can be a very good fight. Two well-rounded fighters, mostly strikers, but Song is attacking with the wrestling a lot more these days. And the fact that he can mix it up on Petr Yan and try to follow some kind of game plan similar to Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili, overwhelm him with a little bit more output, and the fact that he has dangerous power could even increase the effectiveness of that game plan for Song Yadong here. But the thing about Song is when he's throwing punches, especially that right hand, he doesn't necessarily feint as much as some other fighters. Sometimes he'll throw a naked right, and we know that Petr Yan is very good at catching those and countering. He is very hard to catch with a naked punch like that. If you're not mixing up takedowns, if you're not taking off angles, if you're not throwing feints, if you're not hiding it behind something, like even Sean O'Malley for an example did, right? Which is a recent example to point out. When O'Malley landed that right hand that stunned Petr Yan momentarily, he switched into southpaw, which actually forced Petr Yan to switch. And because O'Malley saw the shift, he faked that he was going to throw a jab to the body, a bit of a mid-shoulder feint, and at the same time, he stepped far in enough to line up that left straight over Petr Yan's shoulder. So that feint from O'Malley caused Yan to drop his lead hand just enough to create this open window for O'Malley to attack with the left hand. This is the kind of stuff that you have to do against Yan, because if you're throwing out naked power hands, he's going to catch those with his defense and counter with his hooks. He tried to do this against O'Malley, but that guy's very long and is able to back away, fight from a distance that Yan can't really attack him from with his hands. Song is a different story. They're about the same size, they're about the same height, they're about the same reach. Song would not be able to get away from this. If Song throws out a right hand and Yan catches it and looks for a counter, he's going to most likely catch Song Yadong. And also, when Song throws the right hand, he generally only likes to go directly to the target. He doesn't usually retract and evade after throwing that power punch, so he will definitely be there for the counter shots. The big thing for Song though, he is fast, he's very powerful, and he has the wrestling. If he can keep the output high enough, mix up with takedowns, and present power threats with his right hand, while also kicking out Yan's legs, high feints into low kicks is a very good tactic against Yan, because when you feint up high, he likes to cover up heavily. All of his focus is on defending his head, which is going to expose his legs for those powerful leg kicks from Song Yadong. And if you can mix up the takedowns, that could be great as well there too. So I do think it's a very competitive fight. I do think there are a lot of things that Song Yadong can do, but as an early prediction, I am going to go with Petr Yan for the fact that Song does leave himself a bit open. He will throw out those power hands, and Yan could catch him with a counter off those if he times it correctly. If he doesn't, he could get knocked out. If he does time it, he could definitely hurt Song. The reads against Song Yadong are not necessarily going to be too difficult when it comes to the striking for Petr Yan. I think he'll get a hang of that pretty quickly. It's just a mix-up of takedowns that might be a bit of a problem for Yan, especially in a 3-round fight, because Yan is the kind of fighter who likes to download data often before he starts attacking. 3 rounds may not be enough for Yan, man. So that's why this fight is very competitive. It could go back and forth. As an early prediction, I am going to go with Yan, though. I do expect him to stuff some of those takedowns. I do expect him to counter Song on the feet. And the longer the fight goes, the more it's going to favor Petr Yan. But I will say, if Song starts taking Yan to the ground and wins the fight like that, Yan's going to make some drastic changes in his game, because that should not be happening to him. Then we're going to Mateusz Gamrot versus RDA. If we're going to be completely honest here, this is a fight for Gamrot to do well in. I mean, he's going up against a much older opponent, one of the oldest lightweights on the roster, an absolute legend, a true BMF. This guy has experience like no one else, man. He's fought the best of 2 divisions, and very few guys can say that. but he has been declining, and it's been a slow, gradual decline. At this point, he is nowhere near his prime anymore. At lightweight, he does perform better because he doesn't have to worry about these bigger bodies grabbing a hold of him, but Gamrot is absolutely going to attack him with takedowns constantly. RDA might actually be the better striker of the two, even still today. His body kicks could be devastating against Gamrot if he doesn't get those caught. His left straight should be pretty precise here, but I think Gamrot is going to keep himself far away enough where he's going to want to welcome some of those kicks, try to catch those, take RDA to the ground, and dominate on top, which I think potentially what could happen in this fight. So I do like Gamrot as an early prediction, and that's generally how I can see the fight playing out. Then we go to Geoff Neal versus Ian Garry, but now there's a new dynamic, and it's a mental addition to this fight. Ian Garry does not seem like he's in the best mental state, at least confidence-wise and all that stuff, and that can hurt him in a fight with Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal did pretty well against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Right, that was his last fight. I mean, look what Shavkat just did to Wonderboy. Look what he does to everybody. Geoff Neal's the only guy to test that monster. Yes, he did get finished, but he rocked him, right? And if he can rock a big, long, powerful guy like that, he could potentially get to Ian Garry as well. The thing about this fight is Southpaw versus Orthodox, I think, is going to favor Geoff Neal as it usually does for Southpaws. We did see Ian Garry get dropped by a left hook before. It was an Orthodox lead left hook, so it was a bit different than what Geoff Neal is going to present, but I think Neal's speed could gray out the differences of that. His hands are so insanely fast. He could rival the hand speed of Ian Garry, while also possessing more knockout power, of course. Ian moves his head sometimes, but most of the time he's moving his head backwards using that reach as an advantage, and we did see Geoff Neal able to get to Shavkat. He was attacking with that right hook around the guard, while Shavkat would try to intercept him with the jab to keep himself at range, but Geoff Neal is so fast to get in there, the right hook can get around the shoulder, and literally just shoves in his left straight from the shoulder to the target. Very little space he needs for that, but he often does overextend. So if Garry can evade this, there is a clear counter opportunity for him. And he could do something very similar to Ian Garry as well. Or he can counter him. The thing about Ian Garry though is he's fast on the feet. He's very quick to move in and out. He's a bit of a sniper when it comes to his back foot counters. And he will feint at you constantly to the point where you extend that left hand, which Geoff Neal will do sometimes. Geoff Neal will sometimes just reach out to touch you with the left, and then he'll extend his combo off of that. If he reaches out with his left there, and Ian Garry backsteps for the right cross, it could cause a bit of a collision here, and it's going to be interesting to see who gets the better of who. Ian Garry should get the better of Geoff Neal in that moment, but if Geoff Neal evades that punch, that one big sniping counter right, he is going to barrage Ian Garry and not let up at all. And I don't think Ian Garry has the chin to take too many shots from Geoff Neal. He has to be perfect. He has good high kicks. He's good at intercepting the opponent when he has him pressure up against the fence. Geoff Neal will give you different kind of looks due to his footwork and body position. He will constantly move on these left and right angles and reset into a center position in front of you, but from long range. So he's moving diagonally to the left, constantly giving you feints, reaching out with his hands, showing a bit of shoulder, and then reposition back into his center. He will do this constantly to kind of lull you a bit before he explodes. He has that minor lulling ability, not to the level of Yoel Romero, of course, but it's a little bit more technical than what Yoel used to do. And this could cause the opponent to try to time him with this slow tempo. And as soon as he suddenly picks up the tempo, the opponent's timing gets thrown off completely. And we know about Ian Garry, a lot of his work does come off of timing. That usually is a thing for most snipers. So the long range could be very dangerous for Geoff Neal. He has to make the right movements. He has to understand at what range Ian Garry starts pulling the trigger. Early on, Geoff Neal might get tagged a bit, but the closer he gets to Ian Garry, the more success he's going to have. If he has Ian Garry up against the fence and he's in the pocket, Ian Garry's getting KO'd most likely. So I do think this fight is very close. It can go either way. But given the mental aspect of this, I am going to go with Geoff Neal. And do it funny enough, Ian Garry's like a 2-1 favorite, which is insane by itself. And then finally, we go to Katlyn Chookagian versus Maycee Barber, the long-range mobile veteran versus the angry berserker who wants to get right at you and punch your face in. These two fight in completely opposite kind of styles. Katlyn is constantly moving around, jabbing at you, throwing leg kicks, just picking at you constantly with not too much power with anything she does. She's a point fighter, but she's very good at it. And it could be a bit frustrating for someone like Maycee Barber, who wants to make her way in. She wants to get in your face and just throw hands. She's getting a lot better with using her movement on finding those angles to get in on opponents, but Katlyn Chookagian has active enough footwork to constantly keep that frustration present throughout the fight. I can see where Maycee Barber thinks she can make her way in, she gets popped in the face by a jab, low kicked, and Katlyn's already out of the way. Then Maycee Barber tries to take off the other angle, gets hit by a left hook, right straight, leg kick. Katlyn is moving out again. And this could be a repeated thing throughout the fight. I ultimately do go with Katlyn Chookagian, but it will be interesting to see if Maycee Barber could find her way in. As soon as she does, Katlyn could be in some trouble, but Katlyn will tie up with you, push you up against the fence. She's a very big fighter for this weight class, and she will stall the fight out a bit. I think Katlyn wins through fight IQ, range, and movement. And that's UFC 299 so far. We'll see if there's any addition. We'll see if there is another title fight slapped on top of this. And man, this is like the most stacked card announced so far. And I don't even know how 300 is going to beat this. And leave in the comments below, what do you guys think about this card? Which fights are you most looking forward to? Make sure to give the video a like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.